All right, it looks like it is 6 o'clock, so we will start our virtual forum this evening. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for the school district, and wanted to thank everyone for being with us tonight. We are hoping to answer as many questions as possible. With me tonight to help share in facilitating this is one of our great community and school district partners, Ms. Jessica Wani from United Parent Council.
Hi, thanks, Michelle. I want to just take a second and just thank the district, thank the panelists for coming together tonight to answer questions. There's so much to consider as we prepare for the school year to begin in just about 2 weeks. So as Michelle said, I'm this year's Paradise Valley's United Parent Council president. I also am parent to 2 PV school students, 1 elementary student, 1 middle school student. And I just really, I'm looking forward to the questions myself this evening. I know we've got lots of good questions and I'm sure we're all going to learn a lot. So thank you to all of you and looking forward to this.
And so for everybody who is tuning in with us live tonight, I just wanted to give a brief overview so you know what to expect this evening. I'm going to turn it over in just a few minutes to Dr. Welsh, our superintendent. He will say a few opening remarks, and then he will introduce our panelists so everybody knows who's joining us this evening. We will have a quick presentation that will go over all the specifics of our 2 learning models, which again is where a lot of our questions will come from. And then after the presentation, we will go through our questions that we have. And then Dr. Welsh will wrap up with the closing remarks. So Dr. Welsh, I will turn it over to you so you can kick us off.
Super. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks to everybody who is with us virtually tonight. While, of course, it'd be great to be doing all of these things in person, we know we can't do that right now, which is why we're here anyway. So a couple of things I want to mention, and then I'll introduce our panelists and we'll get rolling. One, in fact, I just happened to be looking on some social media here not too long ago. Do make sure, hopefully everybody got the email several weeks ago at this point about updating information annually. So do make sure that you are updating that. If you're not getting our weekly communications on Wednesdays, it could be that perhaps you accidentally opted out. If so, then you can contact us at our info mailbox or with our marketing department. We'll get you back at it in there. We've heard from a few folks that that's been a little bit of an issue, and that's usually what it is, was just an accidental click when you got the email. Also, I know many folks are probably asking about when schedules will be available and when that's going to happen. We are planning on having our schedules go live in Infinite Campus, which is our student information system, on August 1st. They'll be available in there, so you guys will be able to go in there if you have the app or you have your login information for the portal to be able to do that. And so let me just take a few minutes here and introduce some of the folks who are part of our panel this evening, who will be helping to walk us through the information and answer questions. And they can probably just give a quick wave and a hi when I say who you are. Kicking us off will be, after my portion here, will be Dr. Corson, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Good evening, everyone.
Also with us this evening is, let's see, Dr. Jarris, Dr. Steve Jarris, who of course is our Assistant Superintendent for Elementary.
Good evening.
We have Mr. Andre Long, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary. All right, I know he's on there. I saw him. There he is. Go ahead.
There we go. Hello. There you go.
It's always good when the technology works too. We have Dr. Dina Bruyez, who's our Gifted Education Director. Dr. Bruyez.
Good evening, everyone.
Also with us this evening and somewhat new to PV, Dr. Patrice De La Osa, who is our coordinator for PVOnline.
Good evening and great to be here.
Thank you. Also with us, Miss Susan Seep. She is our president for the Paradise Valley Education Association and has that voice of all of our teachers here tonight.
Hello. Thank you.
We have Miss Linda Taylor, who is our director for special education.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone.
And then we also have Ms. Rita Tantillo, who is our Director for Language Acquisition.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. So we got a full crew here. We got a lot of ground to cover. We will do our best to provide some information here tonight to help walk everybody through, answer as many questions as we can. I want to give a little bit of an overview in terms of the process and how we got here. So we had a committee who has been working very diligently for quite some time here on recommending some options for reopening. Our Superintendent's Committee on Reopening, or SCORE, was formed really back in, May, June, working on options in terms of reopening. And so I'll walk you through that piece. We'll obviously talk about some of the different options, what some things might be when we get to in-person learning, which is a little ways down the road, and then hit questions. There we go. So our SCORE committee, as I alluded to earlier, we had representatives from all across different walks of positions and roles within our PV schools community. We had teachers, we had support staff, we had parents, we had principals, some of our directors on education, all of that. And so that was, I think, critical in making sure that as we were developing our plans for reopening, we had the right people at the table, the right voices there, so that we could effectively plan, particularly given the pandemic that we're in right now. And so the guiding principles of SCORE were really threefold. So three main things that we wanted to focus on. First and foremost is really the safety and well-being of all of our students, staff, and community. And while in education, we always say that learning comes first, when we're in the middle of a pandemic, safety has to come first. So it's safety first and teaching and learning second here. That being the second thing, that we keep meaningful teaching and learning for all of our students and staff. And then finally, making sure that we're able to continue the operations of our district, that we can keep everything running that needs to be running. And as SCORE was working on these recommendations and we were planning for the upcoming year, there were three main principles and scenarios that we were focusing on. The first being that if we were able to, that schools would begin on time and remain open. Of course, we know now at this point that is not an option. And that's certainly not a matter of will, as I hope everybody is aware. The governor a couple of weeks ago did announce that in-person learning for schools here in Arizona was going to be delayed, and that in-person learning cannot occur any earlier than August 17th. And when he shared that date a few weeks ago, he has indicated at that time and several times since that that date was, quote, aspirational and subject to change. And we anticipate that there probably could be some more information coming on that in the very near future. And obviously we'll keep all of our community aware of whatever changes might come as that. But I do want to share that that is obviously an important factor there. And for us, because we were unable to open in person on time, we made that commitment to start with online options, and that we would do so through Labor Day to allow for our families and for our staff and for everybody to have some sort of assurances and consistency, so that it was not a constant moving of the goalpost, so to speak, in terms of trying to figure out when things were going to be started. The other contingencies that we planned for is that schools begin on time but may need to close due to a second wave of COVID-19 cases. And within that was really the scenario that we're looking at, which was that could even mean opening online. And then finally, the other option that we also considered and looked at was just delaying our opening in total due to increases in cases. If it was just on the tail end of a wave, that maybe we would wait for a couple of weeks before we opened up back for classes. And so these recommendations that were developed and the plans that we're talking about tonight, these were all developed with many of the different resources that the SCORE team looked at and had in mind. And that includes guidance by the CDC, information that we've received and continue to receive from Arizona health experts, from the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, from the Arizona Department of Health Services, and from the Arizona Department of Education, as well as many other resources.
So good evening, everybody. When developing our virtual learning options for this coming school year, it was important for us to consider several principles to guide our work. First, learning and accountability for learning would be a priority. Unlike our time in the spring when there was limited expectations for assignments, grading, and attendance, we want to begin the fall strong. And we're confident that we can deliver a rich learning experience for all students to ensure the students are progressing. Second, it was important that we consider options for how students learn best within a virtual setting and provide choices for families based on their situations and preferences. And we also recognize the importance of student social and emotional well-being, especially given that students are experiencing some significant changes to their environments. Our family survey that went out a couple of months ago had over 9,000 responses, and many of those families indicated some social and emotional impact this time has had on their families. And so we're committed to build in social and emotional supports for our students. And finally, to the extent possible, we wanted to maintain various programs for students within virtual environments, including such programs as gifted, special education, English language learner, CTE, and dual language immersion programs, among others. So there are two options for families which meet these principles, PVConnect and PVOnline. And we'd like to take a few minutes to explain each of these programs so you're able to make a more informed choice about which option best suits your child and family. In the PVConnect option, students in all grades will participate in online learning with scheduled real-time virtual instruction. All students will be expected to attend each day and submit assignments and participate as they would if they were attending in person. Children in K-6 will join their virtual classroom each day for direct instruction and activities in reading, writing, math, science, and social studies, and they'll also participate in special activities such as PE and fine or performing arts. Students will join their classes virtually through such platforms as Google Meet and WebEx, and teachers will be using Google Classrooms to share curriculum resources and assignments. PVConnect for students in grades 7-12 will look very similar. Students will join their classes virtually through Google Meet and WebEx, but most 7-12 students have a different teacher for each of their subject areas. So students will follow a schedule provided by the school so students can log in to each class based on their schedule. All elective classes are offered, so students will follow their schedule just as they would in person. And while it's challenging to imagine some classes being taught virtually, such as choir, ceramics, or even art, our teachers have been collaborating all summer to develop appropriate activities for students in those activity-based classes. With our PVConnect model, it's important to note that students will continue to receive program and support services to meet their individual needs. Teachers will also focus on social and emotional support embedded within their lessons and schedule. And students will have the opportunity to transition to PVOnline or in person when that becomes available at each grading quarter. And finally, schools will be providing information to families when they can pick up a laptop computer if they don't already have one. And we are providing one device per PVUSD student. Dr. Jarris and Mr. Long are going to share some additional information on what students and families can expect with PVConnect. And then Ms. Taylor, Dr. Bruez, and Ms. Tantillo will speak specifically about special education, gifted, and English language services within the PVConnect option. Dr. Jarris?
Thank you, Dr. Corson. So at the elementary level, as Dr. Corson mentioned, we're trying to build on the experience we had in the fourth quarter last semester, this past year, and we learned a lot. We learned, obviously, that the online environment can be overwhelming for some students. The pace is very different. To have 30 minutes of instruction with a teacher online is quite a bit different than being in a classroom where you have more opportunities to think, pair, share, and have that social setting. So we are striving to create kind of a balance here that provides that rich academic instruction that we want our students to have, but also recognizing the online experience and the toll that it can take on a student and a family during this time. So in doing that, what we looked at is what does a day typically look like for a student during in-person instruction. We have direct instruction where the teacher is delivering the lesson. And that is certainly not 6.5 hours of the day. For any of us who supervise teachers, we certainly would be having a conversation if we saw teachers talking too much and not allowing students to be hands-on and engaging in conversations and collaborating with others. But that is a part of the day that we want to pay attention to. We also have throughout the day opportunities for small group and individual conferencing moments and interventions with specialists that are important to developing a student's academic skill set. We also have plenty of opportunities for that guided and independent practice where they are working together on problems or working together independently on problems and having students or having the teacher available to ask questions and provide some feedback. And then, of course, we also have the nutritional and wellness part of our day. We have lunch, we have recess, those critical pieces that help address the whole child and make sure that they're getting the physical movement that they need. So those are the elements that we kind of looked at and started trying to figure out how do we balance this in an appropriate amount of time within the school day. And we looked at some other models from other states and talked to our own PVOnline people to talk about what's best for students. And what we came up with were a couple of different models for K2 and 3 through 6. And in both those cases, as Dr. Corson mentioned earlier, there is a schedule to follow. This is synchronous instruction with a live teacher, and you're logging in at a specific time each period, and the teacher is going to be presenting a lesson and then go about that schedule. But in terms of that 6.5-hour day, we're looking at what does that really mean in an online setting? Because in the K2 setting, it's, to be honest, we know that it's not just the student that's logging in. It's requiring parent assistance and it's adult assistance as well. And that really can create a burden for families. So we try to find a balance on that. And what we settled on is, and I'm going to explain here in words what this means. And then I will give you a visual example so you can kind of really get a clear sense of what the schedule likely is going to look like in some capacity at your child's school. But what we looked at is that instructional day in grades K2 being 3 to 3.5 hours. And that would be the whole class instructional day where a teacher is with the whole class, you're all logged in together. There are moments of synchronous instruction where the teacher's actually presenting a lesson. And based on other models that we've seen, we kind of settled on the appropriate amount of time to keep a kindergarten, first or second grade student engaged is probably in that 15 to 25 minute range. We're looking at young ones with a limited attention span, even though they can watch TV forever or perhaps play video games forever. Sitting there listening to a teacher reading, even sometimes we received plenty of feedback. It was difficult at that time. So we're looking at when the teacher's teaching, it's probably in that 15 to 25 minute window. And then time for independent practice to build into that. And we're looking at recommended daily limits for the whole class instructional screen time with the teacher being about 90 to 100 minutes in those early grades. And then the remainder of the day is not wasted time. It's a small group and intervention periods. It's a chance for teachers to schedule individual small group sessions with students to accomplish a wide variety of activities. And the real young grades, part of that could just be the social development and getting students to interact and develop friendships in that kindergarten grade level, especially where they're all new to the grade level. It could be interventions for students who are struggling with math. It could be time spent with a support service through special ed or language acquisition. It could also be the smaller groups or moments for assessment. So this week we might be doing our reading assessments, and I'm going to schedule individual time with each student so that I can listen to them read and provide some feedback and take the data that I need to take in monitoring their growth. Next slide. I thought I had control of it, so I was pushing buttons here. As Dr. Corson mentioned, we're looking at teaching ELA, math, social studies, and science. Special areas and the social emotional learning platform. This will be different from school to school. Some schools teach social studies and science at the same time. So they'll do like a 2 or 3 week block of science and then a 2 or 3 week block of social studies. And because we're anticipating transitioning back to the building, the schools will follow that schedule, but you'll get to see how they're playing that out once they finalize what their individual schedule is going to look like. We also then have built in some time for, in addition to that independent practice or guided practice with the teacher present, you can expect some homework for your students. Again, we have have a healthy approach to homework being additional practice. It's not intended to make up for lack of instruction during the day. And our kind of guideline across K6 is roughly about 10 minutes per grade level. So if you're a first grader, that's 10 minutes. Sixth grader, that might be 60 minutes. And in the primary grades, that's usually on top of some reading time. So we usually ask students to do 20 or 30 minutes of reading with a family member. And then maybe they'll have some a little bit of homework to follow up with their math or perhaps a project that they're working on. Again, the afternoons, the remainder of the time period would be interventions and enrichment opportunities. So not every student in the latter part of the day, not every student is going to have to log in at every single day, but we do anticipate that every student at certain points will be getting that small group and individual time with the teacher so that they can start building that relationship and getting some of the individual attention that they are typically going to be lacking from the in-person experience. Again, a reminder that in the classroom, I do a 10-minute lesson. I let the students work, and then as a teacher, I can walk around and talk individually with students. That's a little bit more difficult in a classroom setting online where everyone still has their microphones on and speakers on, and I'm trying to do some individual work with students. So this gives them that opportunity in the last half of the day. And then, of course, it also allows you to continue with the support services. This is a sample of kind of how schools are building their schedules and what you can anticipate. And again, this is not exactly how your schedule is going to look. I just wanted to give you a visual so you can know what to expect as a parent in terms of time online and what this could look like. In this particular setting, you're starting at 8:45, and it would open with everyone logs in, and there's a little morning meeting and perhaps an SEL lesson and just a wellness check-in to see how everyone's doing. And then we have roughly a 40-minute block for reading. That 40-minute block, as I mentioned before, the direct instruction part of that should be in the 15 to 25-minute range. So we're looking at part of that time period being the teacher instructing and asking questions of students. And then the last part of it, to give the students a little bit of a break of their attention on the screen, some work to do. And again, the teacher will still be logged on and have a chance to ask questions and maybe bring the students back in for a little bit of closure. But you can see that develops throughout the day. We have a moment there for specials. Schools will be building in some recess breaks. We encourage you as a family to follow that and utilize that to follow what we do in the school setting, give those students that physical activity that they need, let them do some push-ups or jumping jacks or, run around outside, give them a little bit of that break that they need. And then in this case, they would be coming back for math. Again, that direct instruction is a block of time, and then the independent practice is a block of time. And you can see that continues down until lunchtime. So in this particular first grade group, they would start at 8:45 of being logged in, and then collectively as a class, their login time ends at around 12:10. Then the afternoon is time for us to call back some students and schedule students for those individual small groups and giving them that individual time that they need. And some time built in for you as a parent or the older children who can call in on their own kind of office hours, so to speak, where I can log in and ask the teacher some specific questions where I was struggling or perhaps I didn't get my question answered earlier. So this is what you can be expecting in grades K2 is about a 3 to 3.5 hour commitment to being logged in, and then some additional moments later in the afternoon for some small group opportunities. K6 is essentially the same thing, except we know that their capacity is a little bit greater for being able to be online and less commitment from a parent to necessarily log them in for many of our students. So we're looking at the same approach, except that the instructional day, instead of that 3 to 3.5 hour window, you're likely going to see like a 4 to 4.5 hour window with synchronous instructional periods from 20 to 30 minutes. Again, following the fact that our students can probably have a greater capacity for that kind of time spent online. And then the recommended daily limit here is roughly in that 110 to 130 minute range. And again, small group interventions in the afternoon. So I'll do a side-by-side comparison of elementary here, or the primary grades and the intermediate grades, Dr. Corson. Oh, I'm sorry. The same subject areas that we're teaching, the homework and independent practice. Again, that should be actually, when it says 20 to 30 minutes, it should be 30 to 60 minutes because it's, again, 10 minutes per grade level. I apologize for that error there. And again, the opportunities for enrichment and interventions and interactions with support services throughout the day. So side by side, you can see that it's essentially the same kind of approach. The first column there is that first grade schedule that I just showed you. The second is the afternoons, is the fifth grade schedule. Again, they've got some 20-minute blocks there with some direct instruction with whole class, and then 20 minutes of some independent practice and guided practice. It just goes a little bit longer in the day. So whereas your first grader, your kindergarten or first, second grader might be done closer to 12:30, in this particular group, they're finishing closer to 1:15, 1:20. And so what we're hopeful is that provides, again, an opportunity for some rich and expectations with instruction, and also keeping in mind the stress that it can have for a student to be logging in and out all day. And this kind of compresses it down to a shorter period of time that will keep them from getting as burned out.
And to share some information regarding our middle and high school schedules is Mr. Long.
Okay. Good evening. Our secondary students will be following their school schedules for their instructional day. Students in grades 7 through 8 will follow their assigned schedule. Those classes will be in blocks of 40 minutes. We schedule small breaks in between each period. Those will last 10 minutes. We also scheduled a 30-minute lunch. And students, although those classes will be 40-minute blocks, within those 40 minutes, students can expect direct teaching. Students can expect some independent work, as well as small group work during those minutes. So students are not actually visually on screen for 40 minutes, but that is the work time. At the middle school level, students can expect 1 to 2 hours of total homework for each night to make sure that students are not receiving online fatigue. It's limited just a bit more since they are on the computer throughout the day. Students will continue to receive support services for special education, gifted, and language acquisition. At the high school level, students will again follow their assigned schedules. However, those periods are in 50-minute blocks. Just a little bit longer. However, there are 10-minute breaks in between each period as well. As with the middle school, within those 50 minutes, students can expect direct instruction, independent group, and small work group as well. And we are also trying to limit homework to 1 to 2 hours each night as well. Students receiving services in special education and language acquisition will still receive those services under this model. Thank you.
So it was also important for us to address how we service students regardless of their programs, and to talk about special education is Ms. Linda Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of both of these models. PVConnect is a model that we used for our extended school year this summer. As Dr. Jarris mentioned earlier, we learned a few things during the fourth quarter. And so based on what we learned, we designed our summer program very similar to PVConnect. The students had live screen time with their teachers, and then supplementary materials were sent home. This worked very well for our population. Online lessons are going to be challenging for our preschool students and our self-contained students. And obviously, as was mentioned earlier, it's going to require parent involvement. That could also be grandparent, older sibling. Get creative, because that's what we're going to be doing. Again, this model was successfully implemented fourth quarter for our preschool students. So they have quite a bit of experience with this model. This will also allow special education teachers to implement an inclusive service model as appropriate with supplemental activities. And then that afternoon time to reinforce, to work in small groups, to do some one-on-one instruction if necessary. So at this point in time, we are anticipating that we should be able to meet our students' IEP minutes, unless they're in a self-contained program or have exceedingly high minutes, in which case we may need to amend some of our IEPs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Dr. Bruez is here to speak about Gifted and our PVConnect model.
Good evening, everyone. So this spring, we continued with our regular Gifted programs, and the fall is going to replicate what we usually do in the school year. So we will have a Gifted cluster classrooms for grades K through 4, and the Gifted identified students will be scheduled into a classroom at their homeschool teacher at that grade level, who has been assigned as the gifted cluster classroom for that grade level. So that will continue. I know there was a question about the curriculum, and the teachers will continue to use ongoing assessments to see where the kids are with the curriculum and differentiate and accelerate within those classes where needed. It's just very similar to as if they were in person. A lot of these teachers do have extensive training and a lot of support from my department. Content replacement is going to look a little bit different, although we have our gifted specialists at each school who delivers honors content replacement. We call them honors classes in grades 4 through 6 in some schools and 5 through 6 in at least all the schools. So in this scenario, the gifted specialist at each school who provides the instruction for the honors classes will work with the classroom teachers to create their schedule just like they do when they're in person. So because the schedule has changed, there's a little bit of time in the afternoon during that, some independent and small group time. So the teachers will have to work with those gifted specialists will have to work with the classroom teachers in order to make sure that they get the direct instruction in math and in reading, which are the honors classes for those grade levels. The self-contained program is going to look also very similar as if it were in person, and I'm going to walk you through the different levels of that. But I'm going to start with the elementary levels, the grades 1 through 6, and then I'll circle back to the preschool and the kinder. The grades 1 through 6 in each of the schools that already contains a self-contained gifted program will remain that way with the gifted teacher for that grade level who is assigned to the self-contained program. Those teachers are the teacher of record. They will follow a very similar schedule that Dr. Jarris just described as far as the grade level blocks, the first and second graders, and then the 3rd through 6th as far as those time frames. The curriculum will continue as if they were in person. So it is highly accelerated in the self-contained programs in the elementary years. The teachers are extensively trained on how to determine where those students are with that curriculum, and they will continue to do so because most of our teachers, all of it actually in gifted, our teachers have been teaching online using online resources that allow for that acceleration and that deeper investigation and enrichment and extended learning that a lot of the gifted students need if they are far beyond grade level. So then I'm going to go backwards in time, and the kinder, self-contained kinder, as well as the self-contained preschool. We are trying to keep all of those options available to parents. For the self-contained kinder, there will be with their teacher at their sites where they have already been enrolled or accepted, and that curriculum will follow the same. The caveat here is that we have to see, we might be reconfiguring some of the kinder classes. We have to look at enrollment. And the gifted preschools, we will also be looking at to see if we're going to continue with the gifted preschools, just like the other, that's our intent. We did send out a survey to see if parents were interested, and we're getting very positive responses from that. So we might go from 4 sites to 2 sites or 3 sites, depending on the parent interest. And that's been a little fluid because of the preschool and the kinder, but we are going to make sure those options are available for gifted preschool and for gifted self-contained kinder as well. In addition, there is always the option of every elementary school has their gifted kinder cluster class. So that's another option for parents. The honors classes in the middle school and high school will really follow along how Mr. Long was just describing. For the secondary schools, there will be honors classes and AP classes that those students will follow the regular schedule for that. Aside from that, I look forward to answering some more questions later on.
And here to speak about our English language learners and our PVConnect model is Ms. Tantillo.
Hi again. Our
model within PVConnect closely follows the Arizona State model for all English language learners. So there's various models for at each level of instruction, being elementary, middle, and high school. And it is required for every student who is identified as an English learner, somebody who is not proficient in English yet, to have daily ELD instruction. And the way that this will work within PVConnect is actually very seamless, because we have that beautiful amount of time set aside for enrichment and for small group one-on-one, which works so well when you're working with students who are learning English. The teacher can interact with one student or two students live, and they can do a lot of articulation that way, vocabulary, and they can also do the things that all teachers do as far as assessment of their language skills, their reading skills, writing, etc. And in addition, this will take a lot of collaboration between either the mainstream teachers at elementary or the content teachers at middle and high school, where we have English. We're very fortunate in the district to have English language specialist teachers at all sites, and they will work in collaboration with the mainstream or content teachers in best practice for how to reach ELs in the best way, most effective way possible. So there will be both targeted instruction, meaning the students will get language lessons specific for them to develop their English skills, and then they'll also be integrated into content so that they will get their lessons on vocabulary and the nuances of English within science, social studies, and math. And most important, well, not most importantly, just equally as important, is that they are also accessing grade level content just as all of their grade level peers. So with PVConnect, this should be a very smooth program for our English language learners, and we're going to work with parents. I know the district as a whole is working to reach all parents and make sure that they have the proper internet connection. I know that we have devices for all. So we're really looking forward to getting this going. Thank you.
So I want to shift now from talking about our PVConnect model to our PVOnline model. And unlike PVConnect, where students are participating in scheduled real-time instruction, PVOnline offers a self-paced learning experience. In PVOnline, students view instructional videos, read from curriculum resources, and complete assignments all at their own pace and at any time of the day while meeting monthly progress goals. Our K-8 curriculum will be provided by Edgenuity, a leader in online curriculum development, and is aligned with the Arizona content standards. We'll share more about Edgenuity in an upcoming slide. Our high school curriculum has been developed by our PVUSD teachers. Regardless of the grade level, PVOnline learning will be facilitated by our own PVUSD teachers, but those teachers may not necessarily come from the student's home school within the PVOnline setting. Teachers within PVOnline will also be providing social emotional support and individualized accommodations to meet students' needs. We are also providing specials and electives within PVOnline, but there are fewer choices than in PVConnect or what you might see in the traditional in-person school. Therefore, some students may experience schedule changes to their elective choices if PVOnline doesn't offer the course for which the student signed up. K-6 students may transition to PVConnect or in-person at the quarter, and 7-12 students may transition at the semester. Here to speak a little bit more about Edgenuity is Dr. De La Osa.
Hi there. Thank you so much. So Edgenuity is really basically the curriculum, considering looking at it as a platform that's been added on to PVOnline to facilitate the K-8. Their online courses and curriculum are built using an instructional model that's grounded in research and are aligned to state standards. They combine direct instruction videos, which also feature an expert on-screen teacher within that content area, with rigorous assignments. There's performance tasks. There's a mixture of also assessments to engage students and to also ensure they have subject area mastery. We have put video demonstrations for both the elementary and middle school onto our website, the district website, and there are also quite a few resources that you can find on the Edgenuity website itself.
And here again to speak about special education, gifted, and English language learners within the PVOnline platform, let's start with Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Corson. We have used Edgenuity in the past for our students that are on homebound for medical reasons. So our staff and our students and families are familiar with Edgenuity. The piece for me that I'm not sure will be beneficial to our students is the fact that Edgenuity provides asynchronous instruction. It won't provide opportunities for students to necessarily speak with their teacher, get feedback, and have that class camaraderie with their peers. So for us, that's my concern about it. However, for our working families, I think Edgenuity gives a beautiful choice because it's available 24/7. And we know that some of our parents are working and they're going to have to help their students to learn. So I see the merits of both. There's a question coming later that asks me which I think is best for our students. And that's really the I in IEP. That's going to be individual decisions for each family to make based on their children's needs.
As for gifted, there's a lot of benefits for students with Edgenuity for gifted students, because there's a few keywords. If you look at their website and look at some of the available information that's out there, I strongly advise you to. But some of what stands out to me is that it is self-paced. It's customizable. It allows students to pursue their own interests and their areas of curiosity. So there's a lot of benefits, because what I was just speaking of, that's something typical that we try to provide for our gifted students. But being that it is customizable, I think it's a very good option for gifted students from any program that they're in. Now, I've been asked, is it a gifted curriculum? It is not per se a gifted curriculum. However, I attend a lot of gifted conferences, and Edgenuity is frequently a sponsor, exhibitor of those, because that means that it does really speak to that our students learn a little bit differently, and this might be a very good option for them. The other question I get is, are they going to be instructed by gifted endorsed teachers? That's not a reasonable explanation here, because the PVOnline teachers already exist. Now, there may be some with gifted background, and I've been working with Dr. De La Rosa. And what we are going to try to do is the gifted students that sign up for PVOnline, we will try to group them in with the same similar teacher at different grade levels, so that my department then can work with those PVOnline teachers to provide some of that background understanding of how gifted learners think, learn, interpret information, so that is the customizable part. So I've already met with Dr. De La Rosa on some of these ideas, and the rep from Edgenuity. And if you're unable to attend real time with your child's future teacher, feel comfortable that this is a good option for your students. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in with our English language learners. As you would expect, the learners are at different levels of English proficiency. So PVOnline would be best for proficient students, meaning they've already mastered enough English to be able to handle that self-paced, independent type of platform or of learning. If I were to recommend that a student, an English language learner, attend PVOnline as opposed to PVConnect, it would be only those students who are at least the intermediate level, and probably at 6th to 12th grade, it would be better suited for. That being said, as long as there's some support in the home, which is going to have to be no matter if you're taking PVOnline or PVConnect, it is also something that is a viable option.
Great, thank you so much. So we have extended the deadline for families to indicate their preference for PVOnline to tomorrow, July 22nd. All students will be placed in PVConnect unless they select PVOnline as their alternative. PVOnline will be contacting families this coming week if they have selected PVOnline as their choice to verify their selection. And you'll find a link for that application on the district webpage. If you've already applied for PVOnline, but you have changed your mind, we ask that you please contact PVOnline at the email address that you see on this slide. So what happens when schools return to in-person? Well, right now our district is committed to online learning through Labor Day, pending any extension the governor may impose to schools beginning in person. If the governor extends restrictions to in-person return, we'll continue with our virtual instruction until we're able to resume in-person attendance. But regardless, PVConnect and PVOnline will continue as options for students for the remainder of this school year, pending any restrictions by the governor's executive orders. K-6 students will have the opportunity to transition from models at the quarter, and 7-12 students may transition at the semester. It is important to note that when we reintroduce in-person learning, PVConnect will likely look different. Students in PVConnect will likely follow the more traditional school bell schedule. Instruction in many cases may be broadcast from the classroom for students to view, and in some cases, students may even have different teachers. The specifics of this model will be determined in part by how many students select to stay in the PVConnect model versus return to in-person learning at that time. And finally, the curriculum department will continue working with teachers to identify the most essential learning outcomes necessary to teach this year so the students are prepared for the next grade level. We have short diagnostic assessments built into each grade level so that teachers can determine students' readiness levels and make adjustments to their instruction. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Wani and Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Dr. Corson.
Thank you. That was, I think, a really thorough presentation. I do want to say that over 350 questions came in between PV school district and UPC. So that's just an incredible amount of participation, and we're going to get to that in just a second. So I do just want to say if there are additional questions that are not addressed in this presentation today, you can certainly, people that are watching live now, leave those questions, hopefully general questions. If you have very specific questions with personal details, you want to obviously reach out to the district. But if there are some general questions that we can help offline get some answers to, we certainly can do that, because with 350 questions, I don't think we're going to be able to take any other live questions right now. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle so we can get going.
Thank you. And we have grouped the questions just so that it makes it easier for those that are watching into different segments. That's not to say that one question is more important than the other. And we're going to try to get through as many as possible. So we're going to keep our answers pretty brief so that we can go through as many as possible. So the first, it looks like 4 are going to fall under Dr. Welsh, and I will start with the first one. Comparing the spring to the fall, how specifically is the beginning of this fall year going to be from what we saw in the spring as far as online learning?
Great question. So I think you heard a lot in the presentation here this evening talking about the differences. And while I think teachers and really everybody did an amazing job of trying to get online learning stood up very quickly this past spring, what you hear is that this is a more synchronous model. So we're expecting that students are online at specific times, getting direct instruction more so than we had in the past. Clearly a lot more structure in terms of the amount of time that students are spending online and what that day is going to look like. So whereas before it was a little more optional in terms of students being able to attend those online sessions, our expectation is that students will be online while, teachers are providing that direct instruction and, working through some small group opportunities and some independent practice. So a lot more structure in it than last year, and much more synchronous rather than asynchronous than last year.
Great. Second question, will the calendar remain the same even if the return to in-person learning is extended past Labor Day?
Yeah, so one of the really good things at this point, and that was part of our decision making, was to try to keep the calendar as consistent as possible. We want families to be able to plan their year, even though we know obviously with travel right now that may be a little bit limited due to the coronavirus, but that way things could be as consistent as possible. So unless something else changes out there, we don't anticipate changes to the calendar.
And I know we briefly went over this question, but I think it's important to reiterate. What time will school start and how long will the school day last?
Yeah, so the start time for schools will be very much in line with what the traditional start time of schools would be. And as far as how long the day will last, you'll be getting information specifically from your child's schools in terms of what that schedule will look like. Again, I'm sure you saw the examples that were shared a little bit earlier. So that's a general time frame of what it'll look like, but it'll obviously look a little bit different just depending upon what the actual start time of your child's school or schools might be.
And then to dovetail on that, what was the reason for keeping the start times the same for high school, elementary school, and did we consider other schedules?
Yes, to that question, great question. Yes, we did consider some changes to that. Specifically talking about perhaps trying to get some of our secondary students to start a little bit later, just based upon research. One of the barriers, or a couple of barriers we ran into were one, just trying to work around the schedules of folks who had already set up a lot of things based on what the schedule traditionally is, for both our staff and our families who may have childcare options in place that they would have to juggle all of that, as well as, and I think Dr. Corson alluded to this earlier, when we get to that point where in-person learning does begin, for those students continuing in the PVConnect model and those who are in person, we're going to be back on that regular bell schedule. And so it would be a little too disruptive to try to start at one specific time now and then shift it in the middle of the year. So, but it was something we looked at.
Dr. Welsh, we're going to give you just a one question short break and pop over to Dr. Jarris. So Dr. Jarris, a parent wrote in with a question. They want to know what PV is going to do to address the trauma to their social interaction that's been caused by the pandemic.
It's a great question, and it's a high priority for us, and ensuring that our teachers have built into their lessons, first off, structures that are supportive of supporting students. We know that our students benefit from interactions, and that's going to be limited in this capacity. So we're providing guidance to teachers on different ways that they can help build community and establish those relationships and those connections with their peers and with their teachers, so our students feel safe and feel connected and a part of something. We also are providing schools with structures and procedures for recognizing students in distress and utilizing our resources to help support those students, reaching out to them and their families and identifying what some of the concerns might be and what we might be able to do to help support those students. So as you know, we have a committee that's been working hard through the summer, and we're finalizing what all those pieces look like for our teachers and our principals so that they are equipped to support our students. Fortunately, we've been doing a lot of training over the last 3 years across the district on trauma-informed practices and ACEs and mental health first aid. So a lot of our teachers have had that training already. It's now just a matter of kind of putting it into place and applying it to the online setting. Okay,
I told you it was going to be short. Back to Dr. Welsh. Here's a question that I know I have seen a lot over the last couple of months even. Can we continue with PVConnect online if we are not comfortable returning to in-person learning when schools reopen, and will PVConnect continue for the entire school year?
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes. For those families, when we do return to in-person learning, whenever that may be, again, we've committed to remaining online through at least Labor Day. And we'll make adjustments as need be based on whatever other orders we get from the governor, as well as facts, data, and science. But yeah, for those families wishing to remain in that PVConnect model, that is going to continue. And our plan is to keep that available through this year.
Okay, I'm going to just move right on to the next one. If someone could discuss the PVConnect expectations when students go back to in-person learning. So on the website, it says teachers will be doing WebEx or Google Meet and teaching their students in the classroom.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So in terms of the expectations when students go back to in-person, so for those who are continuing with the PVConnect model when in-person learning does begin, our expectation for teachers is that they will continue to be able to stream their lessons via WebEx or Google Meet. So kind of like if you were a student who had a webcam in the classroom and you would be able to see what the teacher was doing, for them to be able to participate in lessons that way, be able to, much as they would do in the PVConnect model currently, be able to interact as much as possible with that, with being able to ask questions and things. Obviously, we know for our teachers that's going to be a little bit of a shift in terms of being able to do that, but that is what it's going to look like. Again, when we do get to that in person, I do want to stress that that is going to shift some of the timing and the schedule a bit. I think, as Dr. Corson had alluded to earlier, because we'll have to follow whatever the traditional schedules are. So that's part of why we built the model the way we did, where it will generally follow that, but then we'll really kind of be back into, I'm thinking in particular with some of our secondary students, following that traditional bell schedule throughout the day. So it'll shift the schedule a bit. It'll obviously change a little bit in terms of what that instruction looks like when you're viewing it on a webcam versus, when the teacher's actually sitting right in front of the screen. But the model will continue.
So building upon that, Dr. Walsh, if students continue with PVConnect when face-to-face instruction begins, will they have the same teacher?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so our intent is yes. However, I'll throw the however in there. We will be looking at what the interest level is and what the numbers are in terms of that. If we find that, there might be, let's say, 2 students in this class and 2 students in this class over here, we might be looking to combine those students into a single class. So that way, we don't necessarily have to have every single teacher out there trying to do that double duty. So we'll take a look at that and see if that's an option. Obviously, we're trying to make as little disruption as possible for our students and for our families in this, but recognizing that, just depending upon what those numbers look like, we might have to be flexible.
Back to Dr. Jarris. Will the online program be intuitive such that a 6-year-old can manage their learning independently?
That's going to be a challenge. That there are some 6th graders who will be able to figure that out. But we will be providing
6-year-old, so like much younger.
What did I say?
6th grader.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean 6-year-old.
Graders are on their own. No, I'm just kidding.
So the logging in and logging out is going to be the bulk of it. And as I mentioned during our process, we also recognize that for many students, that's going to involve parent assistance along the way to be a part of that. For some students, it's going to be a challenge to sit there by themselves without that kind of parent attention. So it's likely going to involve some parent assistance. Logging into a Google Meets is not the most complicated thing in the world, but we will provide some guidance for families on how to do that. And hopefully it's enough for, as kindergartners develop the capacity that they'll be able to start logging in and kind of tracking it on their own. But we're really talking about in the Connect model, the need to be at a certain point at a certain time. So that's likely going to need somewhat of a heavy hand with some parent assistance or other assistance in the house.
Thank you. This one's for Dr. Corson. Will the live instruction be recorded and shared for viewing later? And this is, again, we're talking about the PVConnect model still.
Correct. Yeah, great question. There is opportunity for teachers to record lessons. We are asking that our teachers have to be careful, though, in posting lessons that show students' faces or students' names. And so in those cases, in order to protect the identities of students in those classes who have chosen or their parents have chosen not to have their information shared with other families, we can't post those particular videos. But anytime a teacher makes a video that is just of themselves that they wish to share with families, they certainly can do that.
And this one also for you, Dr. Corson. What will the platform be for online learning for PVConnect?
Within PVConnect, the primary vehicle that teachers and students will be using are Google Classrooms.
Okay, and then I will switch to the next one. This is a 2-part question, and I think it will cover probably Dr. Jarris and Dr. Corson to answer it. Will participating successfully in PVConnect option be realistic for a family that has multiple children enrolled in different schools in the district? And then the second part is, are primary and secondary schools participating in general schedule that takes into consideration other grades or schools? Or is it up to each school to determine?
Well, each school is determining their schedule. It would be a little complex to try to figure out, who has siblings at what other schools and how we're going to, even within the same school with grade levels. We the schools are going to need to create the schedules that kind of meet the needs of creating a master schedule that allows students to have support services and some of those other interactions across the school system, across their school day. So it's going to be really, it's not really going to be possible for them to align outside of their own school. To answer the first question, the realistic possibility of a family with multiple children, again, there's a lot of variables in there. Probably one limitation for families to recognize is the capacity of your own bandwidth and internet and your ability to kind of spread your children out. We will provide you with individual devices for each student, but you're going to need to be mindful of what your capacity is with your internet at that same time. And again, depending on the grades, how much interaction is needed with it, or assistance with an adult will be a limitation for some families. If you have, kindergarten, first, and second grader who all need some heavy assistance online, that will probably be a stretch. But I feel like most of our older students will start developing the capacity of doing this on their own and logging in and out. They have the experience from fourth quarter. Now we're just kind of holding it to a little bit more of a schedule.
Great, thank you. And you actually answered the next question, so I'll skip down to when will we get the information on classes, teachers, expectation, instructions for either model that they choose?
From the PVConnect model, from the classroom teachers, you'll start getting that next week, probably mid next week. What's happening right now is schools are still building their schedules based on these models and trying to get everything aligned. So there's that challenge that they're still working through. So that once they have that, they will start sharing that out with parents. But again, if you're looking at for general time frame, you're going to be starting at the same time that your day started, knowing that they're going to log out within that 3 to 3.5 hour range for K2, and then 4 to 4.5 hours for grades 3 through 6. The teacher assignment piece of it, there's still work to be done right now in terms of perhaps balancing classes out. As parents are opting for PVOnline as a model that they're going to use, that is creating perhaps some imbalances within the classrooms. And so we need to kind of get through the final round of people selecting what classes they're going to want, and then schools will take a look and help balance it, because that's really a goal for us, is make sure that your student has the appropriate attention. And to have be in a class with 30 and another class of 12 isn't really the model we're looking for. So schools will need to spend that time making sure classes are balanced and then starting to release that information. And we're expecting to kind of talk about that social and emotional piece. One of those is the re-engagement and reconnection with the school. And so teachers are planning opportunities to connect with their students, and so they'll be hearing from them as well.
Great. And we're going to keep you in the hot seat because it looks like there's a couple others that will fall underneath your category. Is it possible to meet with a couple classmates and attend the virtual class?
Are you if you're asking, if the question's asking, can multiple students sit in the same room and log in online? I believe so. I believe that's how families are getting the support they need in terms of watching their students and getting that support. I think so. There will be some challenges a little bit with that, with regards to a specific classroom teacher trying to call on an individual student and two students sharing a screen. But I don't think that's anything that can't be figured out. You just know that there will be some moments there where each student might need to be logged in separately on their own computer, and then it would be helpful to have some headphones so that they can both listen to the conversations pertinent to them as opposed to hearing each other talking. So.
Okay. And then I know there's obviously going to be some restrictions with this question, but are there any schools or sites in the PV district that would be able to host a small group of kids whose parents need help?
We are looking at creating, kind of extending our mascot camp into the school day at several of our sites. And we had a couple of hiccups we're working through. That's why that hasn't been finalized yet. But through our mascot daycare program, we're essentially going to be offering some daycare centers, so to speak, where students can bring their laptop device. We will have personnel there to help them log on and make sure that they're kind of taken care of, and scheduling them with breaks and lunch and following their schedule. And we will send that out as soon as we have that finalized with the locations.
We're going to transition into some PVOnline questions. So the next couple will be directed to Dr. De La Osa. The first question is, where can we have a demo or a list of the curriculum PVOnline will use?
So we have, as a district, put up 3 different demonstrations. So you have the elementary and you have the middle school from Edgenuity, as well as a look into a couple different courses for the high school that are created in Moodle, which is a platform that we use for our PVOnline. And in terms of the courses, they can look on the website and look at the course catalog. But if there's specific courses that they have interest in and they need questions, they can surely reach out to us.
Great. A question comes in, can I do PVOnline with open enrollment?
Yes, students may open enroll in PVOnline following the same guidelines provided by the district.
Great, thank you. I would like a greater understanding of the PVOnline model. What are the daily hourly requirements for grades 3 through 5? And is the model one online login? Or are students logging between multiple online courses? So is there one login, or are they kind of coming on and off similar to PVConnect?
Right. So at PVOnline, we do support the district-wide single sign-in approach when providing digital learning opportunities. So that would answer the first part of the question. In terms of the daily requirements of logging in, again, this is very flexible 24/7. There are certain hours requirements that are by the state of Arizona. But again, those hours don't have to be completely online. Those hours that they work on learning opportunities can include a variety of things, such as working with their parent on skill building, doing some research, doing some reading that's offline. So that also is in part of those hours that are required.
Thank you. Does a student video conference with the PVOnline teacher, or is it all via messages?
There's a variety of models that we can use to communicate. Again, it can be messaging through Google Hangouts. It can be using the big blue button, which is what we use with PVOnline. So that allows to have video conferencing, not only with just one student, but it can be multiple students at once, so small groups. So there is interaction that is not just through email or messaging.
Now, this was touched upon a little bit during the presentation, but since we have you here, it'd be great to know, because I know I've seen this a lot, and different parents asking this very question. Can students enrolled in PVOnline participate in extracurricular activities such as sports? And if so, how is the school chosen that they can play for?
Yes, we are supporting students being able to participate in all extracurricular activities once students can go back to in-person at the school site that they were originally enrolled in.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Does PVOnline include elective course studies such as a foreign language for high school?
Yes, we do have quite a few elective courses. We have psychology, we have personal finance, we have some in computer science, we even have AP music theory, we have art, we have a variety of electives, and we do have Spanish and Mandarin.
Okay, now there's a couple of parts to this next section here. So if you need me to repeat anything, just tell me.
Okay.
Can students in the elementary grades test out of a particular area or assignment through Edgenuity PVOnline? For example, if a student has mastered adjectives at their particular grade level, do they still need to continue to complete the other lessons assignments on adjectives at their grade level, or can they test out of it?
That's a great question. And I think the Gifted Students program really spoke to this, that because Edgenuity has the capability to customize for students, it allows that customization to be created by the teacher and maintained by that teacher that is working with that student. And that applies to all students, and not just in Gifted, right? It's about if they have mastered, they're able to customize and move them through that material.
Thank you. Does PVOnline Edgenuity require a specific amount of hours spent learning in order to complete a grade level? If so, how is that time monitored or tracked? And you spoke to this a little bit before in your answer to the other question. Is time spent learning online through Edgenuity track for students? And would work offline also count, right? And how would that tracking be done?
Yes, so all students that take courses online in any program have to adhere to the state of Arizona standards in terms of hours logged. That is, again, the both learning that is happening online as well as offline. And in the K-5, we also provide workbooks that go along with the Edgenuity curriculum. So there's lots of opportunities that are going to be offline. So we're not just counting the digital footprint that is provided by Edgenuity. So we have a sense of how long students are online learning or working in certain certain units or opportunities, but we don't just count that towards the hours of completion. It needs to also take into account. So there's some self-reporting that happens, and we can guide parents that are going to become the parent learning coach through that process for the specific grade levels of how to meet those standards.
Thank you. That's really helpful. What is the plan to reintegrate those who choose PVOnline into the regular school year, since they won't be with their actual teacher during PVOnline? How will that work?
Well, I think that's a challenge. It's just like if I were to move from a different state in the middle of the year, I'm going to have to integrate into a class, and that teacher will have to work with either the prior school or the student and the parent to understand where they're at. So in terms of, and that again can be, right now we're saying at the quarter for the elementary because it's not credit bearing, but then at the semester for 7 through 12 because we have credit bearing courses that we're considering.
Thank you so much. And I just want to do a quick check-in with Mr. Andre Long, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary, just to see if he had anything to add to that last question there about, basically that transition potentially into in-person learning from PVOnline.
Because it's at the semester, the students are going to be academically at the same point. So before that semester ends, we'll be able to reach out and inquire from families. Are they interested in reintegrating into the regular setting, at which point we can notify those schools, and those schools and teachers can then reach out to welcome those students back in to the brick and mortar. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Corson, it looks like the next group of questions all fall about underneath your purview because they are about devices and internet. So the first one is, can we use our own computer? If not, why? And then if so, what software is required, and is a camera required?
Right. So families are able to use their own computers if they choose to do that. We're fortunate that we're able to provide each of our families and each of our students a device. And so we recommend that if you don't have a device at home, that you take advantage of the one that we're providing.
And does that make that easier for our IT department if there is an issue with logging in or anything like that, if they're using our district devices?
Yeah, our district devices, our IT department can provide effective support for those particular devices. They are managed devices, and so therefore they can push out various software enhancements through the device, as well as support students if they are having difficulty logging in. Our IT department can support that on devices that we are accustomed to having.
And is there a camera that's required for the computer devices? I know ours come with it.
Yeah, our devices do come with cameras and microphones, and that is important within the synchronous learning environment so that teachers and students are able to interact with each other. And so those would be important features to have within a device. And there is, by the way, no software necessary required. Most of the programs that we used are web-based. And so regardless of the device, a student or family can access those programs through a web-based platform.
When they receive a laptop from the district, are earbuds provided or just the charging cord?
Yeah, we only provide the charging cord at this time. No earbuds are provided. However, there are some schools that have some additional earbuds, but we certainly don't have enough for every student. But if that's a concern for a particular family that feels they need an earbud, please reach out to that school principal to see if there are any available.
And we received this from several different families. Are the school loan devices touchscreens for our younger learners?
Yeah, there are some touchscreen devices at the primary levels. They are not widespread. So not necessarily every student will receive a touchscreen device, but many of them at the primary levels are.
Okay. Next one, is there any sort of cost, or do they sign some sort of liability form if their student damages or loses the district device?
Well, like a textbook or any other piece of equipment the student does have, if the student loses or damages that device, we do ask that the family is responsible for that device. And it really depends on how old that device is to determine the cost of that. A brand new device that we're placing in many of our high school students' hands run just under $400.
Okay, and then this will shift to internet. Will the school district make mobile hotspots available?
We have ordered hundreds of hotspots available for families to support those families that don't have internet connection. They'll be working through their school to identify if they have need for either a hotspot or a connection to Cox. We've also been working closely with Cox Communication to provide internet support at discounted rates for families. We've been successful in signing up nearly 500 families up to this point. In the spring, Cox has extended their program, and we look forward to continuing working with Cox as a partner in our community to help families and support. But beyond that, we do have hotspot devices available as well.
Perfect. I think that answers all of our questions for devices and internet that we received. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions here for Dr. Walsh that basically have to do with enrollment and holding spaces during this time. So first question for Dr. Walsh is, if I decide to enroll my daughter with PVOnline, does she lose her spot at her school?
Yeah, great question. No, that spot is not lost. So we can hold the spots for those students for whatever school they're coming from if they decide to start the year at PVOnline and then perhaps transition back. The only thing that we can't necessarily guarantee, why we would make every effort to do, is if there was some sort of specialized programming, if that happened to fill up afterwards, we'd have to look at that. But generally speaking, obviously, yes, we're going to make sure we're holding those spots for everybody.
Okay, great. And that pretty much answers kind of the second question here. So I'm going to move on to Miss Susie C. Susie, what communication mechanisms will be in place this fall for students and parents with teachers, and how quickly can we expect teachers to respond?
We learned a lot about communication in the spring. One of the things we learned was setting up our Google Classrooms and how many emails that would generate to parents, something we weren't used to if we were just relying on Infinite Campus and our email programs. One of the great things about all the training that we've gotten and the lessons that we learned from fourth quarter was how to manage our Google Classroom notifications to make sure that parents weren't being inundated with assignments being added and due dates and things like that. But PVUSD teachers have an amazing number of tools to help communicate with families. Google Classroom makes it really easy. Infinite Campus makes it really easy. And then we've got our Google Suites. One of the important pieces about this fall's communication and training pieces are going to be how to create some uniform messaging out to families so that it's clear in the subject line which one of your students' teachers you're hearing from, or which one of your students' teacher, right, in a high school setting, if it's a math email or whatever. Many of us were new to Google Classroom and didn't realize how many emails might be set out when we started setting all these things up. And we didn't realize how many different classrooms our students might be enrolled with at any given time. So, there was a learning piece for teachers in the spring, but I would say if we erred anywhere, it was probably on too much communication. And I know that it's a big part of the training piece this year. I'm excited that we have so many waves and that we're going to be able to have a conversation about creating some controls over that. So if nothing else, families can digest the emails that they're getting because the subject lines will make sense and other things like that. I hope that answers the question.
I think we all learned a lot, parents and teachers included. So there's a balance, and it's hard to find a balance, but I think you hit a lot of the concerns I know that I experienced and that I think we all heard, but it's wonderful to know all of that is being thought about. So thank you. Now, the moment all of the students who might be tuning in are waiting for, and this is for Dr. Jarris and Mr. Long, will there be homework?
There will be homework at the secondary level. The expectation is no more than 1 to 2 hours each night because students are online so much during the day, but expect homework.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, it's reading in the primary grades plus about 10 minutes per grade level. So when you get to fifth grade, it's maybe 50 minutes. And we're trying to be really mindful of the fact that we know that this is stressful on the home, right? If your child's at home all day online, then has a lot of homework on top of that, that's just additional burden for the home setting. And so we're really encouraging teachers to stick to that time frame there to help maintain a healthy balance between the online environment and a chance to relax with family and be a kid.
Thank you. This one is for Dr. Corson. Can packets be sent home or picked up that corresponds with what is being taught online?
Yes, great question. Teachers will be working with their schools and schools with their families to provide corresponding print materials, including textbooks, associated learning packets that might be corresponding with with the lessons that are going on in those couple of weeks.
Thank you. This one is also for you, Dr. Corson. Will students in PVConnect have access to hard copies of their curriculum and textbooks?
Yes, absolutely. We'll be making those available for students to be able to pick up. We know how important it is to balance the screen time the students have with real tangible materials that they can work with offline as well.
Okay, so kind of building on that a little bit, Dr. Corson, a parent wrote in, I do not want my child to be only typing all day on a computer. I want them to be using a pencil and paper and writing. I also do not want my child to only be reading online. So how are we going to implement this? So, I mean, I think is there anything you want to add? Because I think you did really kind of hit on that.
Yeah, screen time is really critical for us. And that's why within the schedule, we've limited the amount of screen time that a student might be in, whether synchronous or asynchronous instruction. That's important to us. And we do want students to be able to interact with real materials besides their computers. So that is important to us.
The next group will be for Dr. Jarris. So you're off the hot seat for a little bit, Dr. Corson. Attendance. Dr. Jarris, will there be any modifications to, say, the tardy policy if families are having experience maintaining a consistent internet connectivity throughout the day?
We're going to be as flexible as we can be. Obviously, we're going to do what we can to encourage students to participate and be engaged. A lot of that, it begins with the design of what we're doing and teachers who are creating environments where students want to log in. But we certainly have to be flexible and mindful of the fact that there's going to be all kinds of connectivity issues. There's going to be some stresses in the family. So yes, we would just ask that schools or families continue to communicate and let us know what's happening. Talk to your teacher, talk to the school. But as far as the tardy policy goes, I don't envision that we are, doing the same kind of 3 strikes and, there's a detention type of activity. I'm not sure what that would look like in a home setting. But so yes, there'll be some allowances and flexibility for those types of procedures.
And what happens if there's a kid sick or they have a dental appointment and they're not able to log in for that day?
It would be the same as before. Obviously, you let the teacher know that I'm not going to be available, and then work with the teacher to try to get caught up on what's missing and what I missed. And it would be a very similar setting. And actually, that's where that last half of the day, where you have the flexible time to do small group, really can play well to those types of situations where, a few students were absent yesterday. I can pull them in and just catch them up to speed.
Perfect. So they are required to show up to class every day for attendance purposes, correct?
Yes, and for engaging active learning.
Spoken like a true educator. Dr. Corson, the next one is for you in regards to grading. How will participation be evaluated? Will technology challenges be counted against students? And what will the grading process look like?
Yeah, so to extend what Dr. Jarris said, we certainly don't want any connectivity issues like that affect a student's grade. We want the grades to really reflect learning as through the assignments that a student completes or the tasks the students complete. So participation really is intended for attendance purposes, and we're really looking at the quality of the work that the student produces to demonstrate grading.
Thank you. Dr. Jarris, the next two are back to you. When will we be provided a list of school supplies that will be needed?
That'll be part of the package of when the teachers are inviting students back to the classroom in terms of welcoming them and providing them with a specific list of needs of what they're going to be needing at home. So that will be coming in next week as parents or as teachers are reaching out to the kids and welcoming them back and talking about the class, and that'll be part of that process.
Okay. And we had a few families that had mentioned this. They ordered an education kit a few months back. How will they get it? Will it be sent to houses, or will they need to pick it up?
The schools that I have been in touch with, those are those packets. Those are those I ordered all my school supplies the previous year so that they're there on the first day of school. Schools are holding on to those in a safe environment so that they are available for students when we return in person. And if you are interested in getting that in advance, you just contact the school and schedule a time to come pick it up.
Thank you. Dr. Corson, the next few are about assessment. With distant learning in the spring, they feel like their child possibly fell behind. So how will their child's current skill level be assessed for this coming fall?
We've developed some short diagnostic assessments at various grade levels in key areas so that teachers can help determine where student skill levels are. We're also using some data that we had prior to moving into the fourth quarter on students' learning performance. So we're using that to help identify what the essential learnings are so that we can have very laser-like focused instruction on the key learnings that are necessary for that particular grade level and to prepare them for future grade levels.
Now, you probably don't have the answer to this quite yet because we're not going to be permitted in person. Will PV schools be doing ACT at school or SAT at school during the 2021 school year?
We are planning to administer the ACT to all 11th graders as part of the state testing program. That test is scheduled to be administered in the spring. And so as of right now, we are still planning to do that, and we'll look for guidance from the College Board and the state as we approach spring.
Perfect. And I'm going to skip ahead, so you were off the hook. I'm going to talk to Miss Linda Taylor real quick to make sure we hit a couple special education topics before we wrap up. So the first question we have is, my son is a special education student. I wanted to know if he and other special ed students will be expected to be on PVConnect for the same amount of time as other students in their class.
Yes, we are intending for our students to follow the same type of daily schedule as is being published with this group today. We understand that some of our kids will not be able to sustain attention and sit at a computer as long as some of their typical peers. So we're going to have to get creative with scheduling. Some of that afternoon time might be small group, it might be one-on-one. That might also be when we tap into our para-educators. If a student can't stay focused on a whole group lesson in the computer, they may be able to break up into a smaller room with a para-educator. So yes, we do intend to offer the same model, but we may have to tailor it to meet our students' individual needs.
Okay, the next one real quick, and I know we're almost wrapping up. I'm wondering what the plans are for special needs students in order to maintain free and appropriate public education. Will PV be providing a lot more individualized instruction for those who have IEPs? I can repeat that. I probably was talking a little bit fast. Oh, did we lose? I think we might have lost Linda.
Looks like we might have lost Linda for a moment.
Okay. I know, unfortunately, this is what happens with technology. And so
okay. I hear you.
There we go.
We're back. I'm sorry. I don't know what that was, but it's me and technology. So here we are.
Let me repeat the question real quick. I'm wondering what the plans are for special needs students in order to maintain free and appropriate public education. Will PV be providing a lot more individualized instruction for those who have IEPs?
Yes, and I kind of alluded to that in the last question. Our students, a free and appropriate public education is what our students are entitled to, and we will be mirroring what our general education peers are doing. So they will be getting a free and appropriate public education. It's going to look a little bit different for our students simply because of their ability to attend to online. Students that have low IEP minutes, low service minutes, they will probably be able to do very well in this format. But we're going to have to get creative when we talk about students with self-contained programming and high service minutes. That's where we're going to have to get creative, working with our general education counterparts to do some push-in services, which would look like an inclusive model, and then also using that afternoon time to be flexible with our therapists and our teachers.
Thank you. And then I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Welsh to be mindful of everyone's time as it's 7:29 right now. Thank you very much.
May I add one last thing, Dr. Welsh?
Sure.
Because I know it's been on people's minds and it's come up in terms of community ed and more specifically preschool that we have not addressed. And I did leave that, I left that off the presentation, but I just want to make sure for any of our preschool parents who are still watching, we have a program in place that's online. Community ed has access to those people who have registered for those classes. So they've been communicating that directly, which is why we haven't necessarily shared it here. If you did not receive it, please contact Community Ed so they can fill you in on what the option is. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Jarris. All right, I'll hit a couple things real quick, and I know we need to wrap up because we are at our time. Just a couple of reminders. I know there's still probably a lot of lingering questions out there about returning to in-person learning. As I shared earlier, we have committed that we are remaining online through at least Labor Day. We'll continue to obviously keep our eyes open for any changes that come through the governor's office and just based upon facts, data, and science that's out there. So please know that that is not a hard and fast date, that we will continue to evaluate that just based upon how our situation changes. And so I want to thank everybody. I know there's a lot of information tonight. I hope it was helpful for folks. We tried to answer as many questions as possible. And again, thank you to everybody for just the vast amount of questions that came in. There's definitely a lot of questions out there. Hopefully we're able to answer many of them for you. We will have the presentation, the slide deck here available on the website here shortly. And then this particular video will be on our YouTube channel and on UPC's Facebook page. So if there are pieces where you need to go back and perhaps re-listen to something or share with somebody else who might not have been able to make it tonight, then of course I would encourage you to do so. We'll continue to provide updated information on our website at pvschools.net/reopening. And I'd just like to also thank all of our panelists for their time here tonight, being able to answer questions. A big thank you to Ms. Anderson for co-hosting, and for UPC, of course, for hosting with us. We appreciate that partnership. We couldn't do all of this without all of our parents and their support, and just want to thank everybody and have a great night. Hopefully you got what you need, and we're looking forward to this fall, while of course we wish that everybody was going to be there in person so that we could be learning in person. We know that's not going to be how we're able to start things this year, but we are excited to start the school year and excited for your kids and to be able to continue learning for this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody have a good evening, and the slide deck will be uploaded first thing in the morning, just due to the hour of the evening.
Thanks, everybody.